It was a Saturday morning just before the 4th of July weekend when the knock came. Not a polite tap, but a sharp, insistent pounding that rattled my front door. I was halfway through my coffee, still in sweatpants, when I opened it. And there she was, Karen, president of the HOA. Blonde hair swept into a perfect bob, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, clipboard in hand like a scepter. "I need your pool for Saturday night," she said without preamble. "The HOA is hosting a community unity party, and frankly, your yard is the only one that meets the aesthetic." I blinked. "You need my pool." "That's right," she continued as if this were already settled. "We'll have about 30 people over. Food, drinks, live music. We'll bring our own furniture. You just need to make sure the pool is clean and ready." I laughed, short, disbelieving. "Karen, this is my private property. You can't just," she cut me off. "The HOA has rights, and if you refuse, well," she trailed off with a knowing smirk, "let's just say your recent landscaping violations might get a lot more expensive." That was when I realized this wasn't a request. It was a thinly veiled threat. Still, I played it cool. "I'll think about it," I said, and shut the door before she could reply. The rest of the day, her words stuck in my head. This wasn't just about the pool. It was about control. Karen had been lording over the neighborhood for years. But this time, she'd picked the wrong target. By Monday, flyers were posted around the neighborhood, HOA pool party hosted at 412, Maplewood Lane. I hadn't agreed to anything yet. Karen had already claimed my property. Neighbors started texting me congratulations, assuming I'd offered my home for the event. Meanwhile, Karen strutted around like she'd negotiated some grand favor. That night, standing by the shimmering water of my pool, I felt my jaw tighten. If she thought she could just take my space, my peace, my weekend, she was in for a shock. I knew exactly how to make sure that party never happened. And it started with an idea so petty, so perfectly fitting, that I couldn't help but smile. Karen wanted my pool. Fine. She'd get it, just not the way she imagined. I spent the next morning pacing my kitchen, coffee in hand, staring out at the turquoise water glistening under the sun. Karen's unity party was in 5 days, and according to her, my yard was already booked. But there was a flaw in her plan. She assumed I'd play along. I pulled out my phone and called my buddy Rick, a local contractor who owed me a favor. "Rick," I said, "you still got that submersible pump?" "Sure," he replied. "Why?" "I need to empty my pool. Completely." He paused. "That's going to be one heck of a water bill." "Worth it," I said. By noon, Rick had backed his truck into my driveway. We wheeled the pump to the shallow end, dropped the hose in, and ran the other end out to my side yard. The motor hummed to life, and water began to churn away, trickling toward the storm drain at the edge of the street. I could already picture Karen's face when she saw her venue was nothing but cracked concrete. By mid-afternoon, the shallow end was dry, and the deep end looked like a shrinking pond. That's when I spotted Karen marching up the driveway, heels clicking like angry metronomes. She didn't even knock. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, hands on hips. "Maintenance," I said casually, leaning on the pump's handle. "Figured I'd get it done before the weekend." "You can't do this. The HOA needs your pool." "No," I interrupted. "You want my pool. The HOA doesn't own it, and last I checked, I'm free to drain it whenever I want." Her face reddened. "This is community property in spirit, if not on paper." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Well, in spirit, I'll think of you when I'm sweeping out the leaves." She stormed off without another word, but I saw her whip out her phone before she even reached the sidewalk. I had a feeling that wouldn't be the last I'd hear from her. By evening, the pool was bone dry, a hollow shell echoing the sound of my footsteps. It looked almost eerie under the porch lights. I dragged out the patio furniture and stored it in the shed, locking everything down. Karen might have planned a takeover, but I'd turned the battleground into a desert. Still, deep down, I knew she wouldn't take this lying down. She was the kind of person who, when blocked, found a bigger hammer. And sure enough, the very next morning, I heard the sound of sirens coming down Maplewood Lane. The wail of the sirens grew louder until a patrol car pulled right up to my driveway. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, their boots crunching against the gravel. "Morning," one of them said, adjusting his belt. "We got a call about a disturbance and possible property damage." Before I could answer, Karen appeared from behind my hedge like she'd been waiting for her cue. "That's him," she shouted, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "He vandalized community property and created a public safety hazard." I crossed my arms. "That pool is mine, on my property, and draining it isn't illegal." Karen launched into an exaggerated retelling, claiming neighborhood kids now had nowhere safe to swim and that the empty pool was a death trap visible from the street. The officers listened politely, but I could tell they were already glancing toward the dry pool with mild disinterest. "Sir," one of them asked, "mind if we take a quick look?" "Not at all," I said, motioning them through the gate. We walked to the backyard, where the empty pool gleamed pale under the late morning sun. The deep end was spotless, the pump sitting coiled neatly beside it. "Looks secure," one officer said, noting the locked gate around the pool area. "You got proper fencing, warning signs. Everything's up to code." Karen's smile faltered. But it's unsightly. It ruins the neighborhood aesthetic." "That's an HOA matter," the officer said calmly, "not a police one." For a moment, she stood frozen, her plan unraveling. Then, in a desperate move, she tried to pivot. "Fine, but you need to cite him for wasting water. That's against the drought regulations." The officer glanced at me. "Did you drain into the street?" "Nope," I said, pointing to the trench we dug into my side yard that led to a dry patch of soil behind my fence. "Every drop went into my own property." The second officer suppressed a smirk. "Ma'am, unless you have evidence of a crime, there's nothing more we can do here." Karen's face tightened into a thin, furious line. "This isn't over," she hissed, heels stabbing the grass as she spun around and stormed off. As the patrol car pulled away, I leaned against my porch railing, the summer breeze carrying the faint sound of sprinklers from a neighbor's yard. I knew Karen well enough to realize she'd escalate. And I was right. By sundown, a notice from the HOA was taped to my door, one that accused me of willfully undermining community harmony and demanded I restore the pool immediately. I smiled. If Karen thought a letter was going to make me refill it, she had no idea what was coming next. The HOA letter was a masterpiece of overreach. 4 pages of legal-sounding fluff that boiled down to one demand: refill the pool within 72 hours or face fines of $500 per day. I set it on my kitchen counter, poured myself a coffee, and called my attorney, Mark. He chuckled halfway through reading it. "They have no jurisdiction over your property. This is just pressure tactics." "Exactly what I thought," I said. "So, how do we respond?" "Leave it to me," he replied. "But brace yourself. People like her don't back off quietly." By the next afternoon, Karen proved him right. I caught her in my backyard again, phone out, snapping photos of the empty pool. "Karen," I shouted from the porch, "you're trespassing." She didn't even flinch. "Documenting a violation," she said, her voice dripping with smugness. "The board will see this, and you'll be paying fines before you know it." I walked toward her slowly. "You've called the cops, the HOA, and probably half the neighborhood. It's not working." "You'll see," she said, slipping her phone into her purse. "Everyone here plays by the same rules. You're not special." That night, I heard footsteps on the side of my house. My security cameras caught her and 2 men in HOA polos standing by the pool, measuring the depth with a tape and whispering. They left without touching anything, but the message was clear. They were gathering ammunition. The next morning, I got an official-looking envelope in the mail stamped, "Final Notice." Inside was a photo of my empty pool, taken from my own backyard, and a statement that if I didn't refill it within 24 hours, the HOA would take necessary actions to restore it themselves. That was the moment I decided to push back hard. I called Mark. "They're threatening to enter my property." "Good," he said. "That's illegal. We'll let them hang themselves." We set up extra cameras, not just pointing at the pool, but covering every approach to my house. I also called a friend at the local news station, hinting that a private citizen's pool was about to become ground zero for an HOA power grab. She loved it. By sundown, I'd seen Karen drive past my house 3 times, her eyes darting to my backyard each time. She had no idea the trap was set. The plan was simple. Let them make their move, catch it all on camera, and turn it into a story the HOA couldn't spin their way. When the moment came, it would be Karen's last move. It was just after 8 a.m. when the sound of a latch clicking jolted me from my coffee. I glanced at the monitor. 3 figures were slipping through my side gate. Karen was in the lead, wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat like she was starring in some spy movie. Behind her were the same 2 HOA inspectors I'd seen before, lugging a long garden hose and a set of tools. I hit record on my phone and quietly stepped out the front door, circling around the side yard to catch them in the act. The cameras were already rolling, but I wanted a face-to-face moment. Karen's voice carried across the yard. "Hook it up to the neighbor's spigot. He won't notice until it's done." One of the men hesitated. "Are you sure we should do it?" she snapped. That was my cue. "Good morning, Karen," I said loudly. She spun around, her fake smile faltering. "We're just assessing the situation." "Looks more like you're trespassing and stealing water," I said, holding up my phone so she could see the red recording light. "Smile. You're live on 3 cameras and a local news feed." Right on cue, a van from Channel 8 pulled up out front. My friend, the reporter, hopped out with a cameraman. "We heard there's a little dispute over a swimming pool," she called out, walking toward us. Karen's face went pale. "You called the news?" "Of course," I said. "The public loves a good story about property rights." That's when the real police arrived, 2 cruisers pulling up with their lights flashing. My attorney, Mark, stepped out from behind one of them, grinning. "Officers, we have documented evidence of trespassing, attempted theft, and harassment." The officers didn't waste time. They separated the group, asked a few pointed questions, then told Karen and her crew they were being cited for criminal trespass and theft of utilities. Karen tried to argue. "You don't understand. He drained the pool to spite me." The officer just shook his head. "Ma'am, that's not illegal. What you're doing is." As they were escorted off my property, the Channel 8 cameraman caught every moment, Karen's flustered protests, the HOA men hanging their heads, and me standing by the empty pool with my arms folded. That night, the segment aired. The headline read, "HOA overreach backfires, local man outsmarts trespassers." My inbox filled with messages from neighbors thanking me for standing up to the HOA. The pool stayed empty for the rest of the summer, and every time I walked past it, I smiled. Not because it was a victory over Karen, but because it was proof that sometimes the best way to win is to drain the fight right out of them. If you enjoyed watching HOA Karen's downfall, smash that like button, drop a comment with your favorite moment, and hit subscribe so you never miss the next jaw-dropping twist. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens in the next battle.